And so since 2016, he's exclusively lived on Bitcoin.
Even with AI, there are lots of scams, lots of deep fakes. So this kind of authenticating people and transaction is also very important.
Maybe today you can buy a cup of coffee on the layer 1 in Bitcoin, but 5 years from now, it's going to cost you $30 to buy a $5 cup of coffee on the layer 1. It's just not going to be viable.
Can someone live on Bitcoin only? On the show today, joined by, it's a pleasure to welcome David Bailey, the CEO of BTC and Bitcoin magazine. David has been investing in Bitcoin since 2012 and is a truly Bitcoin OG. Remember that the content on the show is for informational purposes only, no financial advice, so any decision you make is your responsibility and you need to do your own research because any investment is risky and it's important that you do your due diligence and you take full responsibility of where you put your money. Now, here is a word about our sponsor. Greengage provides e-money accounts for small and medium-sized enterprises, high net worth investors, and digital assets firms. They leverage the latest technologies, including blockchain, to unlock new funding and liquidity, a game-changing for many SMEs, which are fundamentally underserved by traditional financial services. As a client of Greengage, you will have a dedicated relationship manager, yes, a real person who will listen. And getting started with Greengage is easy. Trust me, I've gone through the process myself and it's been really simple and quick. So, if you're seeking a more personalized experience in managing your accounts in the digital space, I genuinely encourage you to check out Greengage. And here is a little bonus for you, my wonderful listeners. Use the code FOX10 when signing up to enjoy a 10% on the first year's fee on corporate accounts only. The link is in the description, so take a moment to explore what Greengage has to offer. Now, back to the show. Hi, David, how are you?
Hey, Steffi, thanks for having me on your show.
Well, listen, it's been a while and I wanted to have you on because I've been to your event many times. I mean, you are now a pillar in the Bitcoin community. You have started the Bitcoin magazine.
You're too kind.
And also the BTC conferences, which, I was telling you earlier how important they are to kind of like bound the Bitcoin community, strengthen the ecosystem of project building. They can be very different, but, sometimes there is controversy even within the Bitcoin space, but you are getting all them together. You are getting, to talk and explain each other also why the difference is good. Anyway, great to have you on. And where do we start?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share kind of how I got into Bitcoin in the first place. But again, thank you for having me on your show and thank you for the kind words. We it's very challenging to bring all the different parts of the Bitcoin community together, but we try and do our best, and it is what it is. So thank you for the comments. So I'm David Bailey. I'm the CEO of BTC Inc. I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2012. I have kind of done it all. I've done Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain, ICOs. I've done and tasted all parts of the journey, I guess, that is Bitcoin and digital money. And ultimately, since 2018, I've come to the perspective that really the only thing that's actually real out there is Bitcoin. And so I've been completely focused on Bitcoin since 2018. I got into Bitcoin because I had a friend, I was in finance. I had a friend just graduating from college, and a friend sent me an article about the Silk Road. And my first reaction was like, who would ever trade drugs for fake internet money? That's definitely just like a Ponzi scheme. So I started my journey into Bitcoin trying to prove to my friend that Bitcoin was a Ponzi scheme. And then as I did my diligence, I slowly got to the point where I couldn't explain to you why it couldn't work. And it's disrupting the biggest market that exists in the world, which is value. So it's like, okay, if this has a 1 in a million chance of success times, its value, if it's successful, the price of Bitcoin, even with a 1 in a million chance of success, is astronomical. And so that's when I decided to buy my first Bitcoins. I've just been on this journey kind of ever since, learning primarily through failing, but, surviving.
Well, we all do. I remember buying my first Bitcoin. It was 2016. And then I sold everything. And I think I didn't even make any money. And it was like such a job to even kind of like manage to sell these things. And I was kind of scared of like what I'm holding. Anyway, and then you get back in and then you say, actually, I should have hold. Yeah. But tell me about this concept that you have shared a few times on social media, and I would like to understand, what do you mean with that? Hyperbitcoinization. What does it mean? What does it refer to?
Yeah, so hyperbitcoinization is this future state for the world, this vision for Bitcoin, where 100% of all transactions that happen in society happen on top of Bitcoin, that all money, all value is denominated in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has truly become the value store and monetary system of humanity. And it's even bigger than just, on Earth, Bitcoin as money for commerce in space, Bitcoin for humanity for, thousands of years to come. So it's a future state vision, and there's a long ways to go between now and then, but that is ultimately the vision. Just like our society today is structured and formed around mathematics, and mathematics permeates throughout time, I believe that same process is occurring now with our money. And Bitcoin is going to permeate throughout time. So we need to advance Bitcoin, build Bitcoin, work on the challenges that Bitcoin has, so that it can serve that purpose for all people in society.
Can someone live on Bitcoin only?
Absolutely. In fact, I've met many people throughout the world who have been living on Bitcoin for different reasons. I met a gentleman recently from Sudan, who is an Islamic scholar, and he refuses to use any form of fiat currency because fiat currency is riba. It's haram, and Bitcoin is truly, in his perspective, halal. I mean, it's in compliant with the Quran. And so since 2016, he's exclusively lived on Bitcoin for religious purposes. And he has, I think he has 12 kids. And wow. He takes care of his entire family exclusively on Bitcoin. So he's been doing it, I guess, 2016. That'd be, 7 years now. And, that's just one story. But yeah, absolutely, you can live on Bitcoin. It's not as convenient yet as, living with a bank account. But I think we're not many years away from basically everything you can do with a bank account being recreated in a native format that you can use just with Bitcoin.
So stay on this point. Let's talk a bit about regulation. I mean, you are a board member of the Bitcoin Policy Institute, so I believe that you are doing some work in that space, and regulation has been kind of like a bottleneck for crypto during this bear market, right? Sometimes I find is because there is no education from the government agencies and regulators, and they blame the customer protection as they reason why they don't want to hear about, or they don't want to implement, or they want to be more cautious about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. From the other aspect, I think there is much more they have to understand in order to have more like a friendly framework, maybe. But I would like to hear your take, and also how long you think is going to take, or what is going to take for regulation to be more proactive and more embracing to crypto, so that Bitcoin can become these underlying assets. Maybe it's a bit extreme talking about hyper-Bitcoinization, because you need basically, instead of having the dollar, you need to have the Bitcoin as reserve currency. But I'm sure there is some kind of like path where Bitcoin can be more can become an integral part really of our economy and society.
Yeah, so I think that last point is really an important point. Like Bitcoin becoming a pillar of normal mainstream society and the economy. That's starting to happen. It's somewhere between $500 billion to $1 trillion asset. That's That's big. It's not massive. I mean, it's not the stock market. It's not commercial real estate, but it's big. One more Bitcoin bull market or two more Bitcoin bull markets from now, so like within the next 10 years, the market cap of Bitcoin could very easily be $10 trillion, $20 trillion. Okay, now we're talking about something that is the size of commercial real estate. It is the size of the US GDP. The US GDP is $20 trillion. So as Bitcoin becomes that large, a bear market in Bitcoin means a bear market in the real global economy. There are so many hundreds of millions of users whose net worth will be tied to this instrument, this asset. It really does have real world implications. And so I think the regulatory environment changes and shifts as it kind of becomes a ideological or conceptual idea to something that has like real world ramifications. Even if you don't use Bitcoin, you're dealing with real world ramifications because maybe your customers have less money if something happens in Bitcoin, and now you're affected by it even if you don't hold Bitcoin. So in terms of regulations in general, though, I would say it's a very complex topic because my experience has been so far that all regulations and all laws are really, not all laws, but all regulations are a byproduct of special interests. And there's many different competing special interests that have many different agendas. And sometimes some of those agendas prevail at certain points in time and other times they don't. And so, I think like the number one thing that politicians want is they want financial donations and they want support. And they want to align with different special interests at different times in order to extract that. The other thing they want is to get elected. Probably Bitcoin's biggest strength when it comes to regulation is that our user base of Bitcoin users has gotten quite large. And so the political capital that we have as a constituency has also grown quite large. So back when there was 10 million of us worldwide, no one really cared. Now that there's 150 million of us, now that there's 30 to 50 million people in the United States that have an opinion on Bitcoin, saying that you like Bitcoin will get you votes. Will get you votes that are bipartisan votes. That will get you votes in every state. And so now, for the first time, we're really seeing politicians wanting to cater to this community because they see, just like politicians will cater to the NRA, even if they don't really care about guns, they want the votes. Well, the same with Bitcoin. And so, at this last conference that we did in Miami, we had, a Democratic nominee for president speak, a Republican nominee for president speak, and someone who is likely to be a third-party candidate for presidency speak. So that's an interesting dynamic that has kind of a new dynamic. And we're kind of watching these special interests play out. But I think like a longer answer to this question, or I guess a longer term look into regulations is like, again, Bitcoin is a ideological, in theory thing. When Bitcoin really starts challenging the dollar's status as the global reserve currency, as it really starts having implications for foreign policy, monetary policy, etc., the political donations, the political capital, it kind of takes a back seat to those really important issues. And I think we're going to enter into a new stage of regulation where it's not trying to play nice. It's actively trying to stymie and control Bitcoin. So we're not really in that phase yet, but I see it coming. And then this is all complicated by the fact that you got scams like FTX and Celsius, where they're actually doing real harm to normal people. And there's like a something that needs to be done about these things. And so it's a complicated situation. That's all I can say. So what we do at BPI is we just try to create honest, accurate content that caters to each of the different special interests so that we can explain to the special interests why Bitcoin is good for them. You like your constitutional rights? Well, this is why Bitcoin is good for you. Oh, you like big oil? This is why Bitcoin is good for energy businesses. Oh, you like green energy? Oh, well, this is why Bitcoin is subsidizing the power grid. Oh, you like, you name a special interest that you have. Oh, immigration policy, refugees. Like, we can articulate the value proposition. Yeah, exactly. We can represent the value proposition in Bitcoin in a way that people can see how it appeals and benefits them. So that's what we just try to do, is tell the story of Bitcoin in ways that is academically reinforced, that makes people see it as an ally rather than as an enemy.
Very, very interesting. I want to add on your comment about regulation. I think you're right. It's because there are all these interests, they prevail, and then they can push the crypto agenda or the Bitcoin agenda or not. I mean, you can see a country like Dubai that is trying to get more people there, more businesses, is really pushing the crypto agenda with having regulation. They are maybe more proactive. There is a proper dialogue with government agency and regulators and founders. And the reason is they want to get more business to Dubai. So that is because it's part of the agenda, is their interest. That's maybe why regulation is a little bit more open than in other countries. So I think you brought up a very interesting point.
It's also, the regulators don't really believe us about the vision for Bitcoin. So like if I go say Hyperbitcoinization is our agenda, it just goes straight over their head. Like it's such a pipe dream that, they just don't take it seriously at all. If they actually believed that Hyperbitcoinization was going to happen, and we're trying to have a regulation conversation about what's going to happen when we, in the dollar reserve currency status, when we completely overthrow the global monetary system, when we completely realign what the global geopolitical system looks like because the dollar no longer exists. Okay, these have like massive ramifications for every country in the world. And so if they actually took us serious about what the vision for Bitcoin is, like that's the conversation we would be having, rather than like, how do we attract more business to our city? That's, their focus is on like, okay, what's the next 2 years look like, rather than the vision of what does it look like 20 years or 100 years from now.
I really think that is about fear of unknown, because established institution, they know who they are, they know where they want to get, and the people working for them, they are kind of settled in a system they know. When you comes with something that you don't know, that what is going to be the establishment if there is a situation of hyper-Bitcoinization? Who are going to be the people that have got more power than others because they have got more Bitcoin? People don't know who is going to be this Bitcoin generation. Right. I mean, we don't know how the institution is going to look like. So maybe it's fear. That's why people are inhibited in taking action and embrace Bitcoin. But it's an interesting discussion. But we're growing. I mean, I saw your conferences, and I came to almost all of them, not all of them, but almost. Definitely over the last couple of years, and they are grown, right? You start in the US, now you are in Europe. There are more and more people, and the good things that we were talking before is that there are different aspects of the Bitcoin space building on the technology. So you see people from Ordinals, you see the Maxi, like Jimmy Song there, talking about his book and stuff, and it's nice to see this diversity as well.
Yeah, no, and like taking a step back, like I'm not here to say like what is good and what is bad about Bitcoin existing and growing. Like I can make my arguments for it, but I'm not the determiner of reality or truth. All I can do is say that this is happening. Like, when I got involved in Bitcoin, there was less than 50,000 people in the world that held Bitcoin. Okay, now there's hundreds of millions of people around the world that hold Bitcoin. Like this is, if you step back and you don't look at it in terms of a 2-year time horizon or a 4-year time horizon, like this is happening. Like, 5 years to 10 years from now, there's going to be 1 billion plus people that use Bitcoin. Like the ramifications of Bitcoin growing into the primary form of money for humanity are vast and complicated, and there's good things and there's bad things about it. And so, all I can say is that I hope people embrace what is happening and look to solve the challenges that come from that, rather than trying to kind of close their eyes or bury their head and ignore what's occurring on the ground, this adoption that's happening year over year in a zoomed out way, because we do need to come up with solutions for the problems of change. And there's like a lot of change that Bitcoin is bringing.
Yeah, so talking about this, you are also general partner of UTXO Management that is investing in the Bitcoin space. And I want to bring this up now because we are talking about Bitcoin challenges. And obviously scalability is one of them. There are many others. And there is investment, right? Investment in the space. Where do you see this investment going? Where do you think is more important to invest to solve these challenges that that Bitcoin has in order that we can move forward?
Yeah, so well, right now, I would say in the investment environment, we're coming out of a bear market. So the investment appetite, like it's kind of like the cycles of the Bitcoin season, the 4-year cycle. You have the boom times and the bust times. So in the boom times, the worst ideas get funded with tons of money. You know, in the bad times, the best ideas, they barely get enough money to do what they need to do, and people are much more frugal. So it's healthy to have that, but that's kind of the part of the cycle we're coming out of. Our focus as investors right now, and I would say like our number one thesis that we have on Bitcoin is that now Bitcoin fees are starting to go up on transactions. And we think that that is a permanent effect of the number of people using Bitcoin now and the limited block size that Bitcoin has, which is a design feature of Bitcoin. And so we think all of these fees that are going to be created on the layer one, it's going to incentivize people to seek out cheaper options and cheaper solutions that leverage Bitcoin on layer twos. So we're trying to invest into every layer 2 idea that we come across, every creative solution that has a good engineering team, to see what can work and what can't work. One of the areas that we've invested very heavily in is the Lightning Network, which is one solution to scale Bitcoin for microtransactions to make it viable for people to buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin. You know, maybe today you can buy a cup of coffee on the layer 1 in Bitcoin, but 5 years from now, it's going to cost you $30 to buy a $5 cup of coffee on the layer 1. It's just not going to be viable. So scalability is the number one challenge in our minds that Bitcoin faces. There are solutions to it, but those solutions don't become urgent until there's actual fees that are building up that are creating the pressure for it. So that's where we kind of see the market moving, and we're investing as heavily as we can to support that and support solutions.
That's a great point. What about tokenization, and what about identity? I mean, maybe they are not such a problem right now, as you mentioned about the fees, but kind of everybody is talking about tokenizing, assets, not just digital assets, but also real world assets, and also identity is becoming more and more, how can I say, it's quite urgent because with regulation, you need KYC. And so identity becomes more and more important, even with AI, there are lots of scams, lots of deep fakes. So this kind of authenticating people and transaction is also very important.
So I would say like taking a view back, like step back on the vision of hyperbitcoinization. If you remove the printing press and the ability to inflate the monetary supply from governments, the size of governments and government footprints, they shrink dramatically. So right now we have these like massive governments that touch all parts of society and life. Without the printing press, the size of government may be 1/4 the size it is now or smaller. So we need solutions for people that allow them to interact with society, that allow them to interact in the economy, that doesn't rely on the government to enable that to occur. So identity, very important. You need to be able to prove who you are. You need to be able to carry your history with you and to be able to transact with other people around the planet. Identity is already a problem in the world, but it's going to be even worse of a problem if governments are significantly smaller than they are today. The other issue you mentioned is tokenization. In a world where there isn't an SEC, in a world where there are much less regulatory restrictions on the economy, because those are also a byproduct of kind of out of control government, you absolutely will see a vibrant tokenized economy. I mean, it is a way of establishing trust in a system without having a trusted intermediary selected by the government. So I can see how many tokens have been issued. I know what the supply is. I know how many holders there are of those tokens, etc. So I envision a very vibrant world for tokenization of assets and real world assets. But I think that it's something that's going to come later rather than now, because now the problem that you have is that all of these assets that are tokenized, they exist in the real world, which means they exist in a regulatory environment or a legal jurisdiction where at the end of the day, the rights of those tokens, or your rights as a shareholder in some company, they're enforced by the courts and the legal jurisdiction that you're in. And the rules of the company that's issuing the tokens, they're enforced based on where they're based, where they're located. So you're going to have this conflict with the law that exists that is very hard to untangle because there's a lot of special interest around controlling who has access to capital markets, who's able to create equity, who's able to sell equity. It's a very complicated topic. So I think as Bitcoin seeps into more parts of society, as the user base of Bitcoin continues to grow, these real world assets are going to become more viable because they're going to be harder and harder for government to enforce rules against. I mean, it's already kind of like that. Think about how many ICOs that have occurred. From the perspective of the SEC, every ICO is illegal. Like every ICO is an unregistered security. Just about. Maybe you can point out one or two or like a couple that are not, but almost all of them are unregistered securities. Well, how many have actually had enforcement actions against them? 10, 20, 30? Okay, there's been 30,000 ICOs and there's been 30 that they've gone against. What happens when there's 300,000 ICOs? When there's 3 million ICOs? It's going to be so overwhelming that it's not even going to become practical to enforce the laws. That's what we're going to need to have happen in order to have enough political power to change the laws. That's what needs to happen, is the laws have to change. So I'm bullish on those ideas big picture, but I'm bearish on our ability to implement the changes we need to see today. And so I think it's going to take time.
Yeah, exactly. And all these digital tokenized assets, I think the problem is really at the origin, creating how do you create so many tokens, right? It looks like we are just mirroring the current financial system, but there is novelty, right?
Yeah, I would say like the equity markets is like a huge benefit for society. The problem with our equity markets is that it's extremely expensive for someone to access that. If someone wants to create a security and sell a security, it's extremely expensive. There's a lot of barriers to entry. Only large companies have access. And so it gives big companies an advantage, and small companies are basically have a built-in disadvantage. And so like removing those barriers and that friction, I think is good for society as a whole, but it doesn't work with the rules as they exist today.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it costs half a million, almost half a million to list on another stock market. I mean, these are, crazy things. But yeah, I think tokenization, we need to solve the problem of the origins of those tokens. And as you said, all good ideas, but at the end of the day, maybe they need to be implemented in another way. Now, let's talk a little bit about education, because you are on the board of advisor at the University of Alabama, and I thought that was great things that you're doing. I mean, the university is really embracing the decentralization movement, Web3 and blockchain. And I wanted to understand what's the input that you are bringing to the university and how the university is empowering the next generation of leaders.
So I wish I could say that I was doing more. I feel like the University of Alabama is put me on their advisory board as a pity board position. I've been trying to get the University of Alabama to accept Bitcoin since 2013, and now they regret not doing it. But at the time, it was no. So I went to the University of Alabama. I love the University of Alabama. It's where I met my wife. It's where I met my co-founder of my company. It's probably the primary recruitment source for employees that we hire into our company. And so I love the university, and I want to see them embrace Bitcoin. I want to see them be a pioneer in that space. So that's what I'm pushing them towards. I can't say I've made a ton of progress, but we're trying. I think broadly speaking, the opportunity around universities and Bitcoin is like this industry is being powered by young people. Like it is, the average age in this industry is probably at 28. I mean, it's young. And so, and digital money naturally makes sense to the constituency that has grown up on the internet. So, if you spent most of your life without the internet being a thing, digital money seems way more scary than someone who is just an internet native. So I think the universities are really the pipelines that a lot of talent is coming into our industry from. We need to kind of build those pipelines and recruit as much talented people as possible. Every person that goes and works at a hedge fund or a big investment bank is a wasted soul. Someone who could be doing something super useful for society and instead is just pushing paper to collect a bonus inside of an office complex. Like, we need that talent in our industry. So we need to build the recruitment channels, and ultimately we need to get universities proactively researching and studying the future that hyper-Bitcoinization is going to bring about, because it's going to affect many parts of society, many parts of life. It's going to affect our energy sector. If you think about how many things are impacted by the monetary system, where the government can create money out of thin air and reward it to who they want, it has distorted every major part of our society, that activity. If you remove that activity overnight, you're going to change all of those different pieces. So there's a huge opportunity for universities to kind of give the intellectual thought and vision of some of the changes that need to come. And I think right now they're kind of stuck in, I hate to say it, but the fiat mindset of how things have been rather than what they're going to become.
Yeah, I think education need to be done in a different way. I mean, they don't even teach you what money is at university. I mean, they just get you sucked into the system without you knowing what you're dealing with, and then you understand, the role of debt. And I mean, sometimes I talk to my brother and sister, and I think they are living in another world, and they are looped into the system where they don't understand really how money moves, and definitely acting at the root with students.
I mean, think about what percentage of all funding for universities comes from the government. Okay, if that funding disappears overnight, what will be the university of the future? It won't be like what it is today. If 70% of their funding disappears and they actually have to provide a product or service to someone who's going to pay for it rather than someone who gets a debt or a loan from the government to attend, it's going to be dramatically different. So I think there's a big opportunity in universities to reinvent themselves, and they're going to have to, whether they like it or not. But it's going to be very different than it is today.
So David, tell me a bit about the plan that you have got for Bitcoin Magazine and BTC. I mean, I was talking to one of your colleagues in Amsterdam and said, "Why we should do one in London, really?" So I said, get in touch with me. Maybe we can do something there. What's the expansion? What do you have in your book now you're working on?
Yeah, so we're building our plans for the next epoch. So the epoch is whenever the halving happens, that's the start of the next epoch. And so an epoch is very exciting. It's like a new era. It's a new chapter. It's a fresh beginning. So epoch and the beginning of an epoch always happens when there's Bitcoin spring. So when there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of new users, there's a lot of investment, and so you want to incorporate that into your strategy of how you're going to grow your business and what your priorities are. So right now we're working on our plans for the epoch. We want to expand the conference into every major market on the planet. So we want to have a conference happening on every continent, and we want to use that as a regional platform to build the local Bitcoin ecosystem for that place. So we want one in South America. We're working on one in the Middle East. We're working on one in Asia. We have one in Europe. We're considering, maybe next year it won't be in Amsterdam. Maybe it could be somewhere else. We haven't made the decision, but we are looking at these as regional events, and we want to bring together users, philosophers, startups, investors, all of the different developers, all the different parts of the community that make up what Bitcoin is, and we want to kind of connect them together. So the conference we're taking to all of these markets, Bitcoin Magazine is also going through a refresh, and I would say the last epoch for Bitcoin Magazine was really all about Bitcoin only, making the case for why Bitcoin is different than everything else. Making the case for Bitcoin as sound money. And I think we were very successful. The community was very successful in delivering that message, but also I feel like we've let that message kind of dominate what Bitcoin is. Whereas Bitcoin's actually much bigger than just that message. And so the next epoch for Bitcoin is going to be about building Bitcoin. It's going to be about supporting the people that are doing creative, exciting things, experimental things, and giving those builders a platform to show the world what they're working on. And we want to see the next epoch be dominated by builders building new things that we've never seen before. So we're retinkering Bitcoin Magazine to help facilitate that, to help cover that. And I'm really excited about what the next epoch holds for Bitcoin. I mean, the next epoch, Bitcoin becomes serious. Like we go from next epoch, in the next 4 years, Bitcoin is going to be a $5 to $10 trillion asset. That's going to be one of the biggest assets in the world. It's going to have hundreds of millions of users. It's going to have millions of people that exclusively use it every day in finance to power their life. That's going to be a dramatic change from where we're at now, and it's going to be exciting to watch.
So David, I've got these things because I do events for investors in London, and sometimes they are for listed companies, sometimes they are it's just investor gathering, and I get all these people they are not young, they're maybe in their 60s, and then come up to me and say, "Oh, Steph, what do you think about Bitcoin? We are at a good time to buy." So I get lots of these questions, and I'm saying the halving is coming up, so I've been buying every month. I've got my dollar cost average going on all the time, and that's probably, I think, also the best way, so then you don't get the ups and downs. But what would you say to these people? Because some, they would be watching this video and they would be wondering, is that the right time to buy Bitcoin? Should I buy Bitcoin, or should I maybe go to one of the altcoins that is going to go higher? What would be your answer to those questions?
Yeah, so I would say without a doubt, now is a good time to buy Bitcoin. I would say it's always a good time to buy Bitcoin. I would say the right frame of mind to have with buying Bitcoin is to think of what percentage of your money do you want to have exposed to Bitcoin, and then to spread out that investment over time so that you're taking out the ebbs and flows of the price going up and going down. The mindset you should have in terms of should I sell my Bitcoin, or how do I time this, is what you're buying is insurance. Okay, it's not something that you should try to sell in 2 years or sell in 5 years or sell in 10 years. You're buying insurance, and that insurance is that you have value preserved in a world where fiat currencies are out of control, and something like Bitcoin, a sound form of money, is capturing market share from fiat. So I would advise someone okay, if you want to have 1 or 2% of your net worth in Bitcoin, and that's what you feel comfortable with, designate that as your milestone, spread it out over 12-month period or whatever period you're comfortable with, and DCA in, as you said. The most important thing is to make sure you control your own private keys. That is the most important thing. So when you sign up for a Bitcoin exchange, or you buy a Bitcoin ETF, and you're exposed to the price of Bitcoin, you may feel like you own Bitcoin, but you actually don't own Bitcoin. You own a claim on Bitcoin. And I've been in Bitcoin long enough to know that the unexpected things, the thing no one could see coming, it always comes. It always happens. And so you think you own Bitcoin until the exchange that you're holding your Bitcoin at goes under, or until the government decides, hey, we've changed policies and we need to take this Bitcoin or whatever. And so the most important thing is that you control your own keys. And if that means you have to buy less, it's better to have 1% of your money in Bitcoin that you control your own keys than 10% of your money in Bitcoin where you don't control the keys. So that's what I would say. And I think we're entering a very interesting time for the world. Every major monetary change that's happened in modern history has not come about in a seamless manner. Every major monetary change we've had has accompanied a world war or geopolitical unrest on a global scale. You do not want to find yourself in a situation where there is global unrest and you have all of your money, everything that you've saved over your entire life, exposed to one political system or one bank. That is reckless. So, the Bitcoin is your safety net, so that if something happens, if your bank fails, if your country fails, if your money fails, you have something to tether yourself to. And so, that's what I would say. Definitely buy Bitcoin. The future for Bitcoin is at the very beginning stages of what Bitcoin is going to become, but have the right mindset going in and make sure you're in control of it.
And also, buy something that can actually be very good for your future. Nowadays, we are going to be living much longer. And I was talking to my mom and dad, and they were telling me, our pension is going to be just £1,500 a month. And that is how can you live on £1,500 euros a month. It's impossible. If you haven't saved money, you are going to go living under a bridge. I mean, seriously, I think people should think about, their later life and how they are going to look after themselves. If they think they can just get paid for the job, they were just going to spend all the money and be left with nothing.
Other than gold, it's not really possible to save money because like you save money, you see people that are like, I worked a decade to save $100 bill and I passed it down to my grandson and now $100 bill, it buys you nothing. So it's like the one thing that you can count on, the one thing that governments have been 100% dependable on is that they are going to dilute the value of your savings. If you go back 100 years, 90 years, 80 years, 50 years, 30 years, pick your time period. The purchasing power of your money has declined dramatically. In the past 100 years, it's declined if I'm being generous, 99.5%, but it's probably declined more like 99.99%. So you can count on governments to overspend. You can count on governments to not have discipline. You can count on governments to take the politically expedient path rather than the practical path or what's in the best interest of society. And so, you can save in gold or you can save in Bitcoin. Those are really your options, and everything else is exposed to the political system. And frankly, it might be easy to take a gold coin across the border, but if you need to take your retirement account across the border in gold, it ain't so easy. Yeah. So Bitcoin, you can walk across the border with $1 billion, and the only evidence of it is in your memory. So you got to get Bitcoin. You got to get Bitcoin if you want to preserve wealth.
David, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all these valuable insight. It was a really nice conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, Steffi, thank you for having me on your show. It was awesome.